Are you introducing me? What's the website? The Provincetown.
Provincetown Community Space. 2 Towns Property.
Hey everybody, thank you for coming tonight. I would just like to give a quick introduction to our featured author for the evening, Emanuel Levy. He is a longtime film critic for Variety magazine, the founder of EmanuelLevy.com, and most importantly, while we're here tonight, the author of the new book, Gay Directors, Gay Films.
After, if you don't mind, In any case, good evening. I want to say a few words before reading. First, this is the official launch of the book, and I'm very excited to be in Provincetown. I've been wanting to have such an event. This is such a beautiful space. And as I was walking in, I saw a sign, a poster from Michael Cunningham is getting an award, and just to be in such a distinguished company gives me a lot of pleasure. The question, why Provincetown to launch the book? A number of reasons. The book was written as a tribute to my companion, Rob Remley, who passed away 4 years ago in 2011. And our first vacation was in 1981 in Provincetown. Neither he was a WASP. I'm very Jewish, as you may or may not. By my name, you probably figured that. And our first vacation was Labor Day weekend of 1981, and then we continued to come. Not every year. At that time, I just got my degree from Columbia, my doctorate, and was teaching in New York. And then got a position at Wellesley College, and was there for 4 years. And Rob was dancing for Merce Cunningham Dance Company at that time. I'm very, very happy to acknowledge Freddie, who is my closest friend, who is here. Excuse me. And so we were circling around Provincetown for many years. Not every year, but we continue. And then, as it turns out, I'm very sad to say that our last vacation was also in Provincetown in 2010, and Rob passed away in September. Next week will be a memorial, 4th anniversary. And I wanted to do something to honor. He was not only the love of my life, but he was a very inspirational figure and very, very special, very talented in everything that he did. After being a dancer for Merce Cunningham, he went back to Columbia, got an MBA, and then while I was teaching at Wellesley and was very happy there, and we were beginning to think of maybe buying something here in Provincetown. This is late 80s. And one day he came out and he said, we are moving to California. I want to work for the film industry. So in 1990, we relocated to Los Angeles, and he began at Sony, as an executive at Sony Pictures, and then moved on to Warner, and worked in, New Line, and then Time Warner at the end. The second reason why Provincetown, the book covers 5 directors, and one of them is John Waters, who lives in Provincetown. I want to start with an anecdote. I almost printed it out, but then I thought it's a violation. He's the only one of the 5 directors. The book covers Pedro Almodovar, it's easier for me in alphabetical order to say it, Todd Haynes, Terrence Davis, which is the least known in the US, Todd Haynes, Gus Van Sant, and John Waters. I got an email in August from a friend of John Waters that he handed a new book about him, and he would like to read the book. So I met him in a coffee shop in Joe's Cafe. He's such a celebrity. The guys were circling around him, like, and he came with glasses and almost incognito, but this mustache, people recognized him. And I was very, very nervous. You don't see it. I've interviewed him before. I'll maybe talk about it later. But you don't meet the subject of your book. It was very, very peculiar, but I just gave him the book. And then I got, 2 weeks later, I got a response, which was very funny. I printed it out, and then I consulted with my manager, and he said, no, it's a violation. You have to ask for his permission. But it was very funny, and I'd like to represent the spirit of what he wrote. So the first sentence of what he wrote is, Dear Emanuel, he said, like most egotists, I only read the chapter about me. That was a good beginning. And then he said, I enjoyed very much reading your book. And then he kind of needled me in two respects. One was, he said that one of his most successful movies, Polyester. It's a movie that I don't hold in high regard, but it's a matter of taste. And then he said that one of his favorite movies is Cecil B. Demented, which in the book is described as the weakest movie of the 14 that he has made. And I think that was like showing, like, who are you to tell me, which of my, but I don't rank the movies of the directors, and each one of them made several, and Almodovar made 19, his output is the richest. But you still have to evaluate. I'm a critic, I'm not his public relations. But then the funniest part was the last sentence of his memo, which was like a whole page, so he took the time. And he said, I describe him in the book as the richest director who ever lived, who began as a midnight director, and I stand by it. And he said, I'm the richest director, give me a break, It's Pedro, he's richer than me, Todd Haynes is richer than me. And so in any case, the letter was very funny, and but he liked the book, even though the chapter is pretty critical of his work. So that was the second reason why Provincetown, he should be back. We're having a reception on Saturday. I got through a friend who is working for Strand Releasing, Marcus, that he may or may not be in town this Saturday. And the question was, people always ask, why did you choose these 5 directors? I have done biographies of George Cukor in 1994. And I did a biography of Minnelli, my last book. The one before this, 2009 was the first biography of Minnelli. And friends were joking, said it's about time that you deal with contemporary living directors, not you specialize with dead directors. Cukor was dead by the time I researched Minnelli. And Minnelli was written, I've never been able to open the book. I got quite good reviews for Minnelli. I've never been open. I mention it because the motivation for writing is so diverse. Minnelli was written when Rob, my companion, was diagnosed, was terminally ill, and with cancer, and it was written with a lot of anger. I was very, very angry, and I've not been able. The book was published in 2009. I've not been able to open the book. I've never opened the book since then, and I kind of put it aside and didn't want to deal with it. Whereas Gay Directors, Gay Films was written out of love, with a lot of love. And love for the directors, because it's tough. The older I get, the more I realize how tough it is to be creative and then to put your work in a very competitive marketplace. It's not the best time to write books. It's not the best time to make serious movies. There's an interview in Provincetown magazine I come across. I saw it just an hour ago, and that something saying that the film is not the medium of this century. It's a bit taken out of context, but I do believe that film is in decline, or art film is in decline, at least in the United States, and that's what it's so useful to travel abroad. The 5 directors that were chosen, originally there were 6. There was a French director that I highly recommend. I know that you know his work. The French director, François Ozon. Anyone know him? Yeah. Swimming Pool, 8 Women. I want to say that the directors that were chosen all openly gay. It's been my philosophy, reflecting my the feelings that I have about my own sexual identity. I would never write a book about someone who is not openly gay. I'll never out anyone in a book unless, and all 5 of them, all 5 directors, Almodovar, Haynes, Davis, all of them have come out in one way or another. What is more important for our discussion is that it's not a biography. And I get a lot, I've been teaching film for a long time, longer than I've been a writer, in fact. And a lot of my students say, Terence Davis, how many of you know Terence Davis? Oh, okay, great, okay. Terence Davis hates himself for being homosexual, as you may or may not know. And a lot of my students who are young generation, all out there, you know, they said you should not have included Terence Davis because he's not doing a good job for us. My philosophy is that more important than the writer or creator, the director, is the work. First comes the work. And this is not a biography. When somebody writes the biography of Terence Davis, who is going to be 70 this year, and feel that he's very much a victim. He said, I hate myself, as homosexuality damaged my life. I'm not dealing with that aspect. I'm not sure that Gus Van Sant is comfortable with his sexuality, from what I hear. I know that Pedro, I've asked directly a number of times, and he said that he has no personal life. I don't know anything about John Wharton's personal life, even though I've interviewed him at least half a dozen times. So what I want to, the book is about the work of the directors, not about their lives. But it tries to place each of these directors in context. And I think that if you take Pedro Almodovar, if you take his work, you cannot understand it if you don't know Franco, and you don't know Movida, or you don't know Spanish culture in the late 70s and early 80s. If you talk about John Waters, it's impossible to understand, I think, his work if you don't take into account Paul Morrissey and Andy Warhol and the whole Midnight movie, which doesn't exist anymore, by the way. It hasn't existed in years, you know. But the first time I saw Pink Flamingo, by the way, was in 1973 in a basement of a church in New York, before it got theatrical distribution, by the way, before, you know. That doesn't exist anymore. But in order to understand John Waters, I think you have to take into account, before I forget, he gave me one piece of advice, because that's really funny. He said, you should stand on Commercial Street with flyers for your book. That's what I did. And I answered and I said, how old were you when you did it? He said, late teens. I was 17 or 18. He got to Provincetown when he was 17 or 18, and he would stand with flyers. Oh, were you buying this? You heard? Okay. But he was only, and I said, well, I'm not a teenager. And what he said, bullshit, there's no age. It's never too late to market or advertise yourself on Commercial Street. So that was funny. Of course, I did not, I have not done it even. What is common to the five directors? I was looking for some commonalities. Age, the oldest is Terence Davis, who is 70, and the youngest is Todd Haynes, who was born in 61, so that will make him 54. All of them react to 70s cinema. All of them, there are two Catholics, although they took very divergent. Terence Davis is Catholic, very Catholic. And describe himself again as a victim of the Catholic Church. Almodovar comes from a very Catholic family, but he moved away completely. And in fact, we hear a lot about sexual scandals within the church, but one of his brilliant films is Bad Education, Mala Educación. I think, for me, it's one of his masterpieces, one of the four masterpieces that he has made, at least four. So I want to say that religion, I think Gus Van Sant is Calvinist. Religion does not play a factor. It plays an important role in the work of John Waters and in the work of Pedro, but it doesn't play a role. Todd Haynes is half Jewish. There's nothing Jewish about his work or about his sensibility. And what is, I think, more important is the celebration of outsiders, that you take, they all deal in a very innovative way with characters that were not seen at the time. Because now I think that we have, in fact, we may have too much of LGBT culture on television. American television is saturated. Maybe the turning point is Caitlyn Jenner, I have no idea. But when people say there's not enough, I think there's plenty of gay characters or lesbian characters or transgender. I think it's becoming very popular on television. So I don't think that American culture is, in the past, yes, during the times of Larry Kramer, for example, but he's a product of another generation. The only thing that I found common among the 5 directors, with one exception, and which calls for an explanation, they're all celebrating women, love of women. And the exception is Gus Van Sant, and that came to me as a surprise, because when you see a movie, when you see individual movie, you don't get the overall picture, but only when you place all the movies in some kind of a context, as I did. For each director, I examined each of the films in sequence, in chronology, to see to what extent they evolve or repeat. There are no women in Gus Van Sant's movie, no women. Even Cowgirls Get the Blues is the exception. To Die for Nicole Kidman is the exception. Of the 14 movies that he has made, most of the characters, but I'm not taking a psychological or psychoanalytic perspective, most of the characters in Gus Van Sant movies are working class youth, boys. And I don't want to make the leap from interpreting why Gus Van Sant, if you take his, especially independent movies, but even his mainstream movies, even if you take Good Will Hunting and Finding Forrester, even in these Hollywood movies, the protagonists are usually working class youth, alienated. Often they could be middle class, I think Elephant is a pretty good movie, I think, interesting movie. Not only working class, but all of them are estranged from mainstream society. Most of them come from broken families. Whereas all the other directors, all 4, celebrate women. This is definitely the case of Pedro Almodovar, definitely. It is definitely the case of Todd Haynes. Todd Haynes' career, I'm very, very glad to say that he has made his best film, in my view, in my humble view. Carol is coming out very soon. Todd Haynes has made only 6 features. Only 6 features in 25 years, which shows how, about productivity, that it's very hard for directors in general, and it may be harder for gay directors in particular, especially when they tackle explicit subject matter. It's his first movie about lesbian. There are many gay characters in Todd Haynes' films, like his most popular film, Far From Heaven, that it's about a husband who is a latent homosexual in the 50s, and so on. But I think it will be accurate to say that this is his first lesbian film, and that's focused, and it has a very, I just finished reading the book by Patricia Highsmith, and they changed a lot, by the way, from the book text. Anyone has read? You have read? Okay, only one. Okay, they changed. Actually, you know what? I would rather not talk about Carol because the movie is coming out in a couple of weeks, but I highly recommend that you see it. I mention it because in Todd Haynes' movies, if you go from he has worked, and that's common to all the directors except Gus Van Sant. They work with the best female actors around. If you take Todd Haynes, Julianne Moore was in Safe and Far From Heaven. Carol, to jump to the last one, has Cate Blanchett, who is terrific, and Rooney Mara, who is also brilliant. The TV series that he made, Mildred Pierce, has Kate Winslet. You cannot aspire higher than that, than Julianne Moore, Cate Blanchett, and Kate Winslet. They may be the three most talented actresses working in Hollywood today. Ditto for Almodovar, and I want to read a section about one of his films in a couple of minutes. But early in his career, he works with Carmen Maura. Then they have a falling out. You want a piece of gossip why there was a falling out? It's not in the book. The book has no gossip at all. But that's what I hand. When Women on the Verge of Nervous Breakdown was nominated for an Oscar, he had a boyfriend. And he was allowed to take only one Best of the Academy Awards. And Carmen Maura thought that this was in a car too. She's fantastic. And that's the gossip in Hollywood. And being 1 foot in the industry myself and 1 foot out, you're fed by all kinds. But the story is that they had a falling out. That said, she made a comeback in a brilliant film, one of the films that I admire, Volver, you know, and that's a comeback. But she dominates the first decade of his career, Carmen Maura, and then he works with two fantastic actresses of different generation. Marisa Paredes, you know, all about, you know, she was in 4 or 5, and Penelope Cruz, you know, is very, very talented, you know. So the love of women, ideologically, because I come from sociology and film, they're not just women, the directors do not just celebrate women, but they deconstruct the role of the housewife. And that is called, the housewife is the most dominant figure in all of these directors' work, except Gus Van Sant, all of 4 of them. I want to read a section from, Matt asked me to read, I've not done it before, but I'll read a section from my favorite when I'm at a gunpoint. People say, what's your favorite Almodovar movie? Without a doubt, all about my mother, which in Spanish is todo. We have a Spanish. Say it louder.
Todo de mi madre.
Todo, okay.
Todo sobre.
Actually, I think it's todo sobre mi madre.
Todo sobre.
Mi madre, according to the translator. The phase of this career, this movie came out in 1999, and I think. Is the only director, and I'll be very glad to be challenged about it, is the only director I know who has made 4 masterpieces in a row, in my view, you know, and 3 of them I acknowledged. He made All About My Mother in 1991, Talk to Her in 2002, Bad Education in 2004, and Volver in 2006. I think these 4 represent his best work today. I'm a bit disappointed with his latest film, the comedy. I'm so excited, but you know, that was like a throwback to his 80s movies, you know, like. But I'm told that he's shooting a movie called Silencio, which is back to the cinema of women, which will be in Cannes next year, next May. So I want to read to you a brief section of all about my mother. It is phase 3 in his career, and I describe it as masterpieces. Well, announcing Almodovar's newly gained maturity and continuing his boundless creativity, All About My Mother is the first in a series of 4 great films made between 1999 and 2006, representing the best phase of his career. All About My Mother, still my personal favorite of his films, is one of his universally acknowledged masterpieces and also one of his most commercially profitable films. This one, as well as Talk to Her, are the most commercially successful, and there may be a reason for that. A summation work, All About My Mother is a fiercely emotional yet unsentimental movie representing thematic, visual, and tonal synthesis of Almodovar's entire work. It is his first film to be shown in the Cannes Film Festival, where most of his works would premiere in the future. For this accomplished film, he won the Cannes Best Director Award, though many critics thought he should have won the Palme d'Or, which is the top prize. All About My Mother was his second picture to be nominated for the Best Foreign Language Film Oscar, and his first one to win. The first was women on the verge of nervous breakdown. When the director got the Golden Globe, I vote for the Hollywood Foreign Press for the Golden Globe, so I was there. When the director got the Golden Globe award for this film, he said it was like having an orgasm. But when he won the Oscar, if you have seen the Oscar telecast, he said that it was like experiencing multiple orgasms. Arguably his warmest film, All About My Mother, represents a loving tribute to women in their various shapes, ages, classes, and professions. On the surface, a woman's melodrama, the movie covers the entire range of emotions: loss, grief, reconciliation, camaraderie, and redemption. It depicts a circle of women who confront with forceful courage all kinds of ills and problems: terminal disease, AIDS is in the picture, desertion by husbands and lovers, old age, dementia, unplanned pregnancy, and death. Well balanced, the film mixes elements of comedy and drama, sentiment and humanity in equal measure, all contained in a multi-layered narrative of extraordinary cohesion and emotional power. The critic Paul Smith noted that if the plot is too melodramatic and the setting too theatrical, the characters and performances are decidedly not. They are grounded in realistic context. There is no surface glamour despite the theatricality. The close-up of the characters, the mother nurse Manuela, played by Cecilia Roth, by the way, the aging diva Uma, played by Marisa Paredes, the terminally ill nun Rosa Penelope Cruz, the dying transsexual Lola, the drug-addicted lesbian Nina, who is Uma's girlfriend. They all reveal, if you look at the close-up, they all reveal wrinkled faces of women who have gone through a painful life, allowing themselves to look downtrodden. The opening credits appear and dissolve as the camera pans over medical objects, drips, and dials. In the primary colors of blue, red, and yellow, colors that will serve as the film visual codes, again signaling issues of life and death, birth, and demise. The tale is dominated by women, many women. The protagonist, Manuela, played by the Argentinian actress Cecilia Roth, is a single mother living in Madrid with an only son, Esteban. On his 17th birthday, Manuela takes him to see a production of Tennessee Williams' A Streetcar Named Desire, starring the famous star Uma. Manuela confesses to Esteban that she had once played Stella to his father, Stanley Kowalski, in Williams' play, so we anticipate this information to come back later in the plot, and sure enough it does, in a number of ways. The play's legendary last scene, when Blanche is taken after descent into madness. You have all seen Streetcar Named Desire, I presume, right? How many of you have seen All About My Mother? Enough, okay, good enough. The play's legendary last scene, when Blanche Dubois is taken away after descending into madness, is repeated several times in the movie. So each time, a different actress is playing Stella. For most of her adulthood, Manuela had lived a life of quiet desperation, replete with lies, small and big lies. Lies to herself and to others. Manuela, who has told Esteban that his father had died before he was born, promised to tell him more about his lineage after the show. Sadly, this never happens due to a fatal car accident. On a fateful rainy night, Uma and her co-star and lover Nina enter a taxi after the show, and running after them for an autograph, Esteban is hit by the taxi. The devastated Manuela, who witnesses the accident, is a nurse who organizes seminars to counsel relatives of prospective organ donors. Having decided to donate Esteban's body, she violates the rule and takes a trip to meet incognito the recipient of her son's organ. Almodovar inserts a close-up of the chest of the middle-aged recipient when he gets out of the hospital, blessed with Esteban's young aunt. After the tragedy, Manuela tries to bring together the disparate and unfinished elements of her life, honoring Esteban's last wish to find his father, who is also named Esteban. She returns after 18 years away to her hometown of Barcelona to seek him out. The boy's father is a transsexual, Lola the Pioneer, played by Tony Canto, who doesn't know he has a child because Manuela has never told him. Manuela later relates how Esteban became Lola in Paris when he got, quote, a pair of breasts much bigger than mine, end quote. Manuela is now looking for Esteban Lola in the marginal milieu of a sleazy pickup site where dirty old men cruise hustlers and prostitutes, both male and female. Upon arrival, by taxi, which is Almodovar's, by the way, favorite mode of transport. Every movie has a taxi. Every movie has it, and used in a different way, but each movie has a taxi. Is now a battered transsexual beaten up. I'm sorry, I skipped that. Manuela encounters La Grado, played by Antonia San Juan, a battered transsexual beaten up in the open fields by a frustrated customer. La Grado has big fake breasts and a huge real cock. That will happen, excuse my language, that will happen only in Almodovar movie. She turns out to be Manuela's old friend from the Barcelona days. She's named La Grado because, as she explains, I always agree. 2 decades earlier, La Grado lived with Manuela and Esteban's father before the later had sex change operation. La Grado complains to Manuela that she had taken in the sickly HIV-positive Lola, but the ungrateful ran off with her money and possessions. Through La Grado, Manuela meets Sister Rosa, played by Penelope Cruz, a nun bound for missionary service in El Salvador. Manuela then becomes a personal assistant to Uma, the stage actress whom her son had admired. She helps Uma manage her life, which includes controlling Nina, a tempestuous, drug-addicted younger lover who periodically abandons her. Deciding to change her life, La Grado goes to see Sister Rosa for counseling. She learns, however, that it's Sister Rosa who needs help because Rosa now carries the HIV virus after sleeping with Lola. Though initially resistant, Manuela nurses Sister Rosa through her pregnancy, the birth of her child, and eventually her death at childbirth. In the climax, Manuela confronts Lola, the dying transsexual, and her son's father. And the movie has a happy ending when Manuela decides to bring up the baby boy, also named Esteban, who succeeds in defeating the lethal HIV virus. Like other Almodovar features, this film deals with the binary opposition of procreation and death, creativity and stagnation, individual and community, self-sacrifice and social redemption, love and loneliness. As in most of his films, for every death, there's new life. Esteban's heart beats within another man. Lola transmits the virus to Rosa, but Rosa's baby miraculously survives. Esteban never sees the photo of his father, but his father, Lola, sees the photo of his dead son by Manuela and learns of the existence of his other son by Rosa. Structurally, unlike Life Flash, which is the movie that came before, All About My Mother, which was circular, the stories are told in linear mode, using only a few flashbacks. In the first, Manuela recalls the performance of A Streetcar Named Desire, which she had seen with her son on the night he was killed. The second and third flashbacks are inserted when Manuela tells Uma about her son, and Uma recalls vividly the rainy night when she got a glimpse of the boy through the taxi's window. Consistent with Almodovar's worldview, in the end, the show, just like life, must go on. La Grado, who described herself as a chick with a dick, taken from the script, takes to the stage after a performance of Streetcar Named Desire is cancelled when both Uma and Nina are both hospitalized after a fight. That's actually kind of funny. Proving that any woman has some acting skill, the likable La Grado gives the audience a choice to live or to stay, and several live. Performing his own life story as a transsexual, endowed with both male and female parts. Now remember, this was 1999, like 15, 16 years ago. Not in today's context, I think this would have been perceived differently. Lagrado takes equal pride in her natural big penis as well as in her fake big breasts. Quote, "A woman is authentic only insofar as she resembles her dream of herself," end of quote. Each of her body parts has a price in the marketplace, except for her penis. So I think it's significant, which is a vital part for procreation as well as an object of pleasure. By the way, I got from Almodovar is the only director who said early on in his career, and that served as a motto for my research. He said something, I have it not in this section, but I'll paraphrase. He said, "When I make movies, I want to appeal to audiences' heart, souls, and crotches." And I think that very few directors, like, again, I have to single out Gus Van Sant as the exception. There's hardly any sex in his movies. And perhaps in Mala Noche, his first film in 1985, and very brief. I'm told that he's very shy, not comfortable in staging. The only director who feels comfortable about staging sex scenes is Almodovar. And almost every Almodovar movie begins, I call it like a trick beginning. You can see it very clearly in the noir melodrama. No, not Tie Me Up. That begins with the blind director. No, you come. But in almost every Matador, by the way, is one of my favorites. The most sexual movie that he has made. Atame as well. But I want to go back to this guideline because after reading what he has said about his work and what motivated him, when you look at his work, it is very important. His attention to detail is amazing because I have actually a section here that I can read. I jump because we're running out of time and I want to hear you if you have questions or comments. But okay, I'll conclude with this section because the film celebrates women as women, viewing them all as performance. All About My Mother is dedicated to Almodovar's own mother, who passed away shortly after the shoot was over, and to all the actresses who have played actresses on stage or in film, including, and if you stay to the end, when you see the credits of All About My Mother, it includes Betty Davis, Jenna Rollins, Romy Schneider. Manuela had once performed in A Streetcar Named Desire opposite her then husband, becomes an understudy by necessity, not by calculated design. And this is the deviation. There are 2 points of reference in All About My Mother, but he deviates from them sharply. There's A Streetcar Named Desire, as well as All About Eve. But there's no cynicism at all in the movie, unlike All About Eve. There's no one in the character, no one in All About My Mother who barely resembles the character that Anne Baxter played, Eve Harrington, who wants to take the role. It is crucial, I think, to Almodovar's philosophy that Manuela, when she performs the part, she's not calculating, she's not manipulating, she's forced to do it so that the show will go on. But she's not trying to steal the part from Uma. Early on, this will be my last paragraph, early on, Almodovar became known as an actor director, one who spends a lot of time with his performance. Based on his philosophy, quote, he told me in an interview around Voltaire, actors are the life of the cinema. Everything is transmitted by them. Lighting, mise-en-scène, and all the rest are important, though nothing compared to the actors. The richest, most subtle acting to be found in the work of the 5 directors in this book is in the films of Almodovar, without a doubt. Because of his perception of actors, quote, as They are the equivalent of the special effects, Hollywood special effects in my films. Actors are. Known for his rigorous mise-en-scène in which the actors, not objects on the core, are central, he has paid attention to the smallest detail of acting, guiding his performance in terms of voice, facial expression, gesture, body position, and body movement. He loved actors because, as he told me twice in 2 different interviews, it's impossible for actors to lie to me when I'm directing them. I ask the director to be completely naked in the emotion. And I work very hard, this is a quote from an interview, I work very hard on how the actors express the dialogue, how they walk, how they talk, how they pick up an object. When they pick up an object, I want it to be very physical, not obvious, but definite. And that's why actors love to work with him. Since I began with him, I would say that at one time, and that brings me to Michael Cunningham, he loved the hours on Almodovar, and at one point there was a talk that he might direct. I wish he did, but he may be smart. He believes that language is a barrier, the culture. So despite many offers from Hollywood, he resisted. He may be one of the few foreign directors who have resisted tempting offers, big budget movies, to work in Hollywood. And I think that in his work, in as much as his work touches on universal issues, there's always something very particular, Spanish, very indigenous. I think it's very significant, and I didn't see it the first time I saw the movie. Going back to All About My Mother, even though most of the references are to Tennessee Williams and to Mankiewicz, All About Eve, at the end, the very last scene of the movie shows Maritza Paredes, rehearsing a play, but it's a play by Lorca, not a Hollywood. I think it's that in each of his movies you see the tension between what is universal, what is becoming like accepted as our common culture, versus something which is still, it could be a song, which a lot of indigenous Spanish music in his film, but always trying to balance. He never forgets the notion that he's, first and foremost, he's a Spanish director.
He always says the pueblo.
He always?
The pueblo. Is
in
every movie.
And he will not interrupt a song or a flamenco dance, in order to insert a melodramatic scene. If you have comments or questions, yes, please.
I have 2 questions, if I may.
Sure.
The first question is, how do you feel about heterosexuals that direct, heterosexual directors that do queer films? Like, they seem to be just as cognizant of this idea of the queer film of being about identity being a cultural construct. So like Ang Lee in The Wedding Banquet in Brokeback Mountain, or Bob Fosse in Cabaret, or Stephen Frears in My Beautiful Laundrette.
Well, but each one is different,
Mm-hmm.
I think the case that was, I was public enemy #1. I was not the only one. I think around, you strike me as very young. Am I right? Okay.
21.
20?
21.
21, okay. You have seen, no, the reason why I mentioned that, because actually the movie I'm going to mention was made before you were born, but hopefully, so that I'm very pleased that you're in the audience, by the way. I believe the future is the younger generation. Philadelphia, that was a test case, you've seen Philadelphia?
Yeah.
Okay, you have, every movie is another story. I don't want to generalize. I know that Jonathan Demme, who directed Philadelphia, the movie was 1993. It's hard to believe, 22 years ago. That was a cause célèbre. We signed a petition in Hollywood. Because as it turns out, it's interesting that you asked this question, because it is directed by Jonathan Demme, who is one of the most liberal directors, left of center, working in Hollywood. That's known, so I cannot fault him for that. The character that has HIV is played, you cannot be straighter than Tom Hanks. It could never have been made in 1993 with an openly gay actor. And yet, even Jonathan Demme, and if you go online, you'll see there's a correspondence, because we signed The lover of Tom Hanks in Philadelphia is Antonio Banderas, by the way,
Right.
early on. You know, it just happened so interesting. And there's not a single scene in which the two of them, I think they only hold hands. There's not a single kiss. You know, and Larry Kramer and Adam. My
They're
Beautiful
asexual.
on Dread, I Cannot Fall, Stephen Free. I think it's a pretty good movie. I have not seen it in a long time. I think Ang Lee did a good job with, you know. I think it's a very bad idea, by the way, that gay directors should direct gay films. That brings me back to Spike Lee. He doesn't say it anymore when he would say Scorsese, even Scorsese, white director, Sidney Lumet, cannot make a good policier about blacks because he's not black. I think it's a very dangerous argument culturally to say that only lesbian can make genuine lesbian film, only gay men can make gay film, only Puerto Ricans can make films about Puerto Ricans. Do you see what I mean? But I don't want to lump them together. I understand the constraints of a movie like Philadelphia. Philadelphia could not have been green lit, you know, without Tom Hanks. It's the reality of Hollywood, you know, and it reached audience, and I think that in the overall scheme, it made more good than bad. I don't think it's a great film. Again, I've not seen it in a decade, at least. I've seen it a number of times, but not in a decade. And every film should be visited and revisited and tested. So I think that the subject matter should be opened. I think straight directors should make gay-themed films, and gay directors should make non-gay films. And each one of these 5 directors has made. What's the second question?
And the second question is, how do you feel about this younger generation of filmmakers making queer films, like Xavier Dolan and I Killed My Mother and Once Anyways, These Rees for with Pariah, Sean Baker and Tangerine?
Well,
Tangerine isn't opened yet, is it?
it
Yeah,
has.
it opened. Yeah,
It
opened
played in
Provincetown.
Provincetown,
Yeah,
actually.
and it played it at the film festival.
It did play, yeah. So the question is, I'm sorry.
Do you have like a particular opinion about this? I guess maybe a new wave of queer cinema.
I think new wave, because queer cinema is actually around. Todd Haynes is a founder
yeah. Todd Haynes is from the new queer cinema, like
of the early '90s,
but
right?
there's a second wave, so to speak.
I think when you talk to directors or actors, you know, I think they're very much afraid of being typecast. If you only make gay films, actors cannot afford to do it. Actors cannot, because they're like pigeonholed, you know. But even gay director, I think it's a dangerous. It's a very narrow definition of what in my view, of what an artist should do. You know, if you only make gay films, you become a gay. You should talk. The person to answer this question is actually Todd Haynes, longtime producer, who comes every year to the Provincetown Film Festival. We've done a lot. Christine Vachon, Killer Films, written a number of books, you know, and she's responsible probably for the most significant queer or gay films of the past 20 years, including Boys Don't Cry, you know, and she's the producer of Carol, the upcoming Carol. I think she will be. I think that directors like Todd Haynes, when you talk to him, if you get the label, is a gay director, that means the moment that you put a label, I don't want to be identified as a gay, I'm openly gay critic, but I would like to believe that I can do a decent job when I evaluate. Most of the films that I review or write about are non-gay themes. I would carry your argument to an extreme to say, it's very dangerous to say, somebody said, oh, you should not have reviewed this film because you're not such and such. You're not a woman, you're not a lesbian, you're not a transgender. I don't think it's a good argument for art, for creativity.
Does mise-en-scène mean? Mise-en-scène?
Mise-en-scène.
Mise-en-scène.
What does it mean?
Oh, it's a French term. Actually, mise-en-scène is staging. It's a French term. It's everything that a director is responsible for to put in front of the camera before. It is, for example, what is the distance, camera placement. where would it makes a huge difference how you shoot a scene if you shoot it in a close-up or from mid-range or from a long take, you know, or the relations between human beings and object. Mise en scène, literally from French, means to put into scene. Mise en scène, mettre en scène, you know. And they call directors, by the way, metteur en scène. Régisseur, so it is staging everything that goes in front of the camera before you shoot, like the decor, the lighting, you know.
Also, part of what you read was a quote, "I'm a chick with a dick."
Right.
John Waters in Serial Mom, she bribed a garbage man to go through the policeman's garbage, and they found pornography that was chicks with dicks.
By the way, that's the film that everybody agrees, and that's a model. When you ask John Waters about Serial Mom, he said it's, I'm not sure he would use the word favorite film, but he would say this is the kind of adult movie which cross over it. I think it was the closing night of the Cannes Film Festival, Serial Mom. And he worked with a star and a bigger budget. He never had that success. I think it's his last really good film, by the way. 1990. Sorry?
Hairspray.
Hairspray, but that's before.
Yeah.
Hairspray, the movie that he made, not the musical.
Right.
Right.
Because it began in '88 as a movie with Ricky, yeah. It's an yeah, but that's '88, whereas Serial Mom is 1994. After Serial Mom, I'm worried about somebody like John Waters because he has not made, of the 5 directors, he's the only one whose career is really in danger. He has not made a movie in 11 years. A Dirty Shame was his last movie in 2004. He wants to make a movie with Justin Bieber, he says. A Christmas movie. He said he wants to make a Christmas movie with Justin Bieber. But it's, I think it's very tough to be a director and to be in control, to choose. And the only reason why, somebody like Todd Haynes has such a small output, he's a perfectionist. You know, he's in his mid-50s and made only 6 movies. You know, so he made like a movie every 5 years. In this space, you know, if this continues, his career output will be 8, 10, but he has control. Maybe that's the other side of, you know, he has control over each of his pictures, each aspect of his picture. And some of them are more successful than others, you know, but I think it's tough for every director to be in control in terms of subject matter, and I think it's tougher for gay and lesbian. And people say, why didn't you include lesbian in your book? Well, I wanted to have some control over gender, because these are like 5 men. The moment that you put, also I cannot think of a major lesbian director. Can you?
Chantal Ackerman?
American.
American director?
Hasn't broken
Yeah,
through.
Kimberly Pierce has made 3 movies in 20 years. She began very, very high, Boys Don't Cry, and then didn't make a movie for a decade. You know, if you look at how many of you have seen, I thought she was very talented. She is talented, but it's probably a matter of finding financial backing. Rose Trochet, Goldfish,
Yeah.
was a terrific movie. She made 3 or 4 movies. She's all but gone. You know, I think it's vain.
Jamie Babbitt.
How many movies has she made?
5?
3, 5. But if they played, yeah. The one thing which is very, very important, that's why I urge all of us, film festival, each of the directors that I have interviewed, acknowledge the importance of film festival for the work. And Provincetown has a great festival, really great festival. In fact, Gus Van Sant still goes around and saying that I saw Mala Noche in 1985 in a gay festival. It took 4 years for Mala. How many of you have seen Mala Noche? It's one of his interesting movies. 85, it took him 4 years to get theatrical distribution, and it's only when he made Drugstore Cowboy, which is his second movie, with Matt Dillon, which is a pretty good movie. that he got theatrical distribution for his first for Mala Noche, and the budget for Mala Noche is $25,000, which he got as a loan from his father.
Oh,
and his
God.
father, he's a rich boy. He comes from a rich family, Gasman's son, from Connecticut. And he claims that his father insisted that he returns the money, and it took like a decade to return the $25,000 investment. But festivals, each of these directors literally owes his career to film festivals. Joel, please.
Can I ask you though, as someone who watched what I thought was the de-evolution of the New York Film Festival into, just an opening night. This is Hollywood, sort of a pipeline directly to Hollywood. And so, I saw Taxi Zoom Clo in the 80s at the New York Film Festival. You'd never see that anymore because all the slots are taken by movies that are already momentarily for release.
You do. I'll tell you, there was a small movie, but very good, very gay, and very, very Stranger in the Lake or by the Lake.
Yeah.
That played in the New York Film Festival. That came out of Cannes.
Okay. In what year? This year?
Rented. It came
2 years ago.
The whole movie
Oh.
is set in a cruising area in
Okay.
Paris with full frontal nudity.
Wow.
By the way, one reason why John Watten's career, by his own admission, is in decline, and I doubt if he will make movies. I hope he will, but there are not many taboos to break anymore. The only taboo, the only one in American cinema, is male frontal nudity. The only taboo. There's all the other taboos, and even you see a glimpse here in a John Waters movie, and here you see a glimpse in Almodovar movie. But even even in Europe, they are very careful. You mentioned there's a French director who always does sex movies. Not French. Gaspar Noé. Gaspar Noé. Yeah.
He just did Love.
But the problem is audiences. The moment that you describe a movie as a gay film, you automatically narrow the potential audience for that movie. By the way, I live in the neighborhood of Taxi Zoom Clo, and the movie played at least 6 months on the Upper West Side,
I know,
cinema studio.
I know.
But these times are over.
I know. I used to
Fassbinder
work for
was
New Yorker Films. I know.
Oh, you're a New Yorker?
I used to work for New Yorker Films, and I am a New Yorker.
Oh,
Dan
Daniel Talbot is a hero of ours. He's a hero. He's still
I'm
around.
lying too.
He's still got. Yeah, but these times are over because
I
I
know.
remember when Fassbinder, The Marriage of Maria Brown,
Oh, yeah.
played for 52
Yes.
consecutive weeks
At the Lincoln Plaza.
at Lincoln. Yeah,
I
what
know.
became Lincoln Plaza. It was
Yeah.
called 52 weeks. So, on the other hand, I want to end on an optimistic that I'm not a prophet of bad news. I have friends here. My oldest friend and his partner are here from Vermont. They are more up to date than I am in terms of foreign cinema. And the reason for that is the new technologies and new media. What is gone forever, and I'm a product/victim of my socialization. I love the idea of going to movies and sitting next to you, and then after the movie, if we like or don't or disagree, you remember this time you engage in a debate that goes on for. The communal aspect of movie going is gone. On the other hand, the democratization is very encouraging. That somebody, can I mention where you live?
Sure.
Yeah, that somebody in Marlboro, lovely town, a small town in Vermont, can see a foreign language before it gets theatrical distribution. If it gets. So streaming, no, the availability,
I think it's on
the
VOD.
question is, it's such a complicated question. The question is, how do you find out about these movies? Because
This guy.
how do
Read
you
the reviews? This guy.
but they're not. No, but they're not.
No.
They're not reviewed. The New York Times went on record saying that they
Spending
will
time-
not review. They cannot. Many
Spending
more
time in
movies are
Europe.
being made.
Yeah, spending time in Europe, actually. I mean, we don't.
They get capsuled. They don't get full review in the New York Times. What's your source of
I
information?
basically read the New York Times.
New York Times, and
That's
you
the
rent
source of
movie-
most of my rental information. But they write about the festival, so
Yeah,
you hear.
they go to. It's crucial for film critics if the newspaper is generous enough, and New York Times is still a bit, you know, is to send the critics to Cannes or to Toronto right now, to Venice. I was in Venice last week, Venice Festival, Berlin, to a major one. But I think it's encouraging. You remember the joke, who was the comedian? I think it was the host of the Oscar show one year, who said, I can see the image and our hearts sank, but it became a reality. He took a shot, was he a host or was he a guest on one of the Oscar telecasts? And he took Lawrence of Arabia, which screams to be seen on a huge screen. And he put the image on his cell phone, like 10, and he said, "Oh, what a beautiful movie! I can see the desert. I can see the." It's becoming a reality. I think soon. I went to a lecture. Spielberg believes. I handed about a year ago. Gave a talk that DVDs will be gone. You know, the whole thing restrict. So the question will be how to bring new movies to knowledge. Going back to the New York Film Festival, they have to balance their programming. I'm not, you know, they don't show these esoteric movies anymore. You're right, they do not. They have.
Even New Directors, New Films doesn't show it anymore.
The new direct, I saw Almodovar. What Have I Done to Deserve It? Was in New Director, New Film in 1984, and as a result of this exposure, they went back to it was number 4 of his movies. As a result of this exposure, New Directors, they went and released his first 3 movies. You know, but it's very tough to run a festival, and I don't know. I think Provincetown maybe doesn't have this constraint because of the level of education of the audience. I think the audiences of this festival in Provincetown may be the most sophisticated or the most liberal, wouldn't you say? No? I mean, putting out in terms of openness or in terms of, you know, but when you run an operation, they have also, the opening night, Zemeckis happens to be a good director. I have not seen The Walk. The documentary was very good. So there's a good word of it, you know. But it's like a mutual exploitation, I would say, about festivals in Hollywood. Spielberg's movie with Tom Hanks, The Thriller, is in the New York Film Festival. It's called
Bridge of Spies?
Yes, it's also in the New York Film Festival. So it's like a mutual. The directors need the prestige of the festival behind them. You know, Spielberg wants the richest, definitely more than John Waters, by far, most powerful director, and yet that's what still enables us to work. Spielberg needs prestige, recognition. And the only way to get recognition is from critics. Sorry?
Redemption.
Redemption. Redemption for what? He's made pretty good movies.
No.
Considering how commercial these movies are.
Yeah.
He's actually he and Zemeckis are actually good samplers of commercial directors with good artistic instincts. They're not like Michael Bay, you know, that kind of thing. Although, on this note, I will end. I'm looking at the clock. Spielberg is one of the producers. He's smart. He puts his money. He's a producer of the Transformer, but he will never direct a movie like Transformer. But he will collect his percentage of the profits. One more question, if there is. If not, okay. Thank you very much for coming here.